Are you dealing with health issues? Are you dealing with mental health issues? Maybe you're dealing with financial issues. Are you fearful? Are you afraid? If there's any area in your life where you're not dealing or you're not operating in the fullness of what a life is supposed to be like according to the Word of God, it is because you do not have a revelation or a knowledge of God's love for you. So stay tuned with this entire series on God's unconditional love. Welcome back. My name is Hudson Funk, and this is Hudson Funk Ministries. And I believe today's episode number 9 speaking about this, which is incredible because, again, when God first revealed this to me of what He wanted me to speak on, I honestly had no stinking clue of how I was going to do it. I've talked about the love of God before, but how do you present this? How do you minister to this to people in a way that they can understand this, where they can really have a revelation of this, where they can go and minister this to somebody else? And that's a hard thing for me to do, especially when it comes to the crucifixion of the love of God, something that is so uncomprehendable, something so out of this world. And then, I'm supposed to minister it to other people or to other people. It's a very hard concept for me to, I guess, teach to other people. But anyway, this entire series has come out of John chapter 13, or I think it's in verse 13. And out of verses 34, he goes on to say here, this is the night before Jesus was about to be crucified. And, just by reason of the fact that this is his last night that he was about to be crucified, you would expect that Jesus' words would not necessarily mean more, but he'd be saying some very important things here, because just by happening to the stance that he's gone. After this, it's over. This entire ministry, everything that God has looked up to, everything that Jesus did for the last 33 years, all led up to this point right here. He was now passing this ministry on to a couple of disciples. We don't actually know how old these guys, but a lot of scholars say that these guys were in their teenagers. Some of them were probably in their 20s, passing this huge ministry onto these guys. I would assume that what Jesus is about to say here would be very important to listen to. And out of John chapter 13, verses 34, it goes on to say, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. And I've been just mainly taking that point and saying that, you cannot, although I believe that we should be doing what the scriptures tells us to do and all those things, but at the end of the day, you can't give what you yourself have not received. People treat others the way that they themselves have been treated. If people have a chip on their shoulder, if people are harsh and mean towards you, it is because somewhere down the line, something happened to them. They've taken that in a certain way, and they're just expressing that situation, that experience to you. When people are angry, when people don't know how to deal with anger or bitterness or unforgiveness, they often just lash out on people who they never meant to lash out on. For me, as a kid, if you believe this or not, I actually had quite a bit of anger issues as a kid. I remember in high school, I think grade 9 to 11, I was known as the kid with anger issues. I was the kid in my high school classes, in my math classes, known with the anger issues. And a lot of that was just me being playful, just trying to get a rouse out of people and all that stuff. Just me being a dink is what it was. But half of that reason was I really was just an angry person. I wasn't necessarily angry at people or anything, but I just had a very short temper. I lashed out very easily. I did not know how to control my emotions. I could keep them in to a degree, but when people lashed out against me, when people said things I did not like, you'd hear it from me. And if I was losing an argument, I wouldn't punch, but I'd get pretty aggressive very quickly. And oftentimes I would just hold all the crap, all the stuff in, and I'd come home and I'd take it out on my parents or on my relatives, which is not cool. That's not how it is, but that's just how it ended up going. I would get angry at people. I'd get angry at life. All that bitterness or all that short temper would just build up and build up and build up, and it often just come out at home. And people are exactly like that. When things happen to people and you don't know how to deal with it, it just comes out to other people. And that is one of the biggest reasons with Christians today, is God has given this huge commandment. A commandment that is impossible in the natural. I'm going to get into a scripture here that I probably should have started off in the beginning of this series, but it is absolutely impossible to minister this to other people, what God has told us to do. But I will say this, it is hypocritical for God to tell you to do something that you aren't able to do. And the point that I'm trying to make here is this: people have a trouble, especially Christians have trouble administering grace and mercy to other people when they deserve no mercy and grace. But that's the exact point that I'm trying to make here is you yourself don't deserve mercy and grace. You yourself do not deserve forgiveness. You yourself do not deserve love and compassion. You yourself don't deserve anything on this planet. If you could understand the love and the grace and the mercy that God has given towards you, if you could just get a revelation of the way that God acts towards you. Most people see the Old Testament, they see the New Testament, they see the complete differences in these testaments. They see the complete contrast in these covenants. And they say, well, was God hypocritical? What was he doing? How come under the Old Testament he was so mean, he was so harsh, he was so brutal, but yet under the New Testament he's so kind? Is he hypocritical? Did he change? I think it's the Bible that says out of Malachi chapter 3, it says, I am the Lord, I change not. The Bible says out of Hebrews chapter 13, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God did not change. There's nothing to do with God. The thing that changed was the covenants that we lived under. I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain this to people, but the entire history, the entire timeline of the Bible, of the entire earth, from Adam until now, there's been scholarly accepted through the Bible and physical evidence in the world. Evolution is not a fact. That is a theory, okay? It is not to be sustained. It is not a fact. It's none of those things. It's not true. And I'm not going to get into all that. But creationism, according to the Bible, the world has been around for around 8,000 years. The law has only been around for about 2,000 years. From the time of Moses to the time of the New Testament to the time that Jesus came was around 2,000 to 4,000 years-ish. We don't exactly know the exact time dates, but that's scholarly accepted around those times. Which means, and if there's been around for around 8,000 years, it's been 2,000 years since Jesus has died. So that's about 2,000. So there's been about 4,000 years or 2,000 years of law and 2,000 years of grace. But there's an extra 4,000 to 2,000 years somewhere in that timeline. That was before the law. Another thing, there have been about 3 dispensations, is what we call, of the Bible. There has been the first dispensation that was before the law. The second I don't know how to say that word. I'm just going to dispensation. I don't know if that's how you say it. That's the law. And then the third dispensation, and that was what we are living under now, the New Testament. The law was only temporary. I took a lot of time to speak about this in the beginning of this series. The law was never to be done away, was never to really be a satisfied or a actual thing. God never wanted it that way. David said, in blood sacrifices and sin offerings have you had no pleasure in. God never wanted to do those things. The entire temple, the sanctuary, the holies of holies, the veil and the sacrifices and the Hanukkah and all these things that people call the things that God required Moses to build, it was all a picture, all a shadow and picture of things that were to come in the New Testament reality. The point that I'm trying to make here is that under the first dispensation, or whatever you want to call it, you could call it a covenant technically, is the time from Genesis, or the time from Adam until the time of the Old Testament law. That was a complete time of grace and mercy. Cain killed Abel, his brother. They both gave sacrifices in the book of Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11 goes into talk about what happened exactly. But Abel's sacrifice was more acceptable unto God than Cain's. Hebrews chapter 11 identifies that was because of faith. Anyway, Cain got jealous of this situation and killed his brother Abel. I'm sure there's lots of people who know the situation. The point that I'm trying to get here is when Cain killed Abel in complete cold-blooded murder. That was cold what he did. There's self-defense and then there's complete murder. This was complete cold-blooded murder. There's 4 people on the face of the planet and these guys can't get along with each other. That's ridiculous already. And second of all, this guy just murdered his brother. Here's the point that I want to get at here, is when this happened, Cain ran away from his family, okay? A lot of people think that, when Jesus left the presence of Adam and Eve, no, he didn't. The Bible says that while Cain and Abel and all these guys, God still walked with them. God still talked with them. Cain ran away from the presence of God, okay? Because he was fearful what would happen to him. And then it goes on to say this. I'm paraphrasing this. I'm not getting this perfectly. It goes on to say that Cain, or Jesus or God, the pre-incarnate Jesus, but God, came unto Cain and said, I will avenge you 7-fold if anybody comes after you. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable that God would do that. This guy deserves complete punishment. Under the law, apparently this guy would have to be stoned to death because of what he did. First-degree murder, that was under the law, that administered instant death. That was not tolerable. Now, but before this period of time, God administered complete grace to him. He avenged him 7-fold if somebody ever came after Cain. Now, I want to say this too. I talked about this on last week's episode. Everything that I've been saying here, everything I'm trying to express here, I'm trying to express to you that your sin, everything that you do is not tied to the way that God blesses you, the way that He loves you, the way that He treats you. God's love is unconditional. That is the entire point of the series. But I'm not telling you, I'm not advocating you for to go and live in sin. So here's what I'm trying to get at here too, is after this situation, I believe it was Cain's great-great-great-grandson that he ended up killing a guy in self-defense. Again, I'm paraphrasing this. You'd have to go study this out for yourself. He killed a guy in self-defense. And this guy, the exact same thing, I think it was his great-great-great-grandson of Cain, or Cain was this guy's great-great-great-grandpa. Or anyway, this guy had said that because if he killed this guy out of self-defense, he says, well, if God avenged Cain sevenfold, surely he'll avenge me 77-fold. And these guys, the point why God brought the law in, Abraham, a lot of people call Abraham, the father, the patriarch, and the big guy. The Jews pretty much worship this guy. I'm a big believer in Abraham, according to the New Testament under Romans, that he is our father. Galatians talks about that we are the heir of promise under Abraham. This guy was a great man of God. This guy is unbelievable. But here's the thing. Abraham, if you did not know this, married his half-sister. Under Leviticus, I believe it's chapter 18, says if anybody marries or does incest or marries a half-sister, he has to be stoned to death. It's immoral. That's completely wrong. That's haram in the Muslim world. That's ridiculous. Abraham married his half-sister. Not only that, after he married his half-sister, it would have been his stepmother's daughter. It wasn't his real mom's daughter, but it was his dad's daughter from a stepmom. Not only that, but Abraham, not only once, but twice gave up his wife to have relations with the king so that he himself would not get killed, because he said that Sarah, who he was married to at the time, was a very fair woman. Apparently she was a very beautiful woman, and guys would have tried to get with her. So Abraham, to save his own life, gave up his own wife, said that, hey, tell them that you're my brother, so that I don't get killed because of the fair beauty of you. They're going to want to have sex with you. And he did that twice. That is unbelievable that he did that. Under the law, he would be absolutely stoned to death for these things. Before the law, there was grace and mercy extended. But here's the point. I'm saying these things very quickly. Very quickly. I should really take an entire series to explain this all. But because people were taking God's grace and His mercy for approval of sin, God had to do something about that. And the reason why I'm bringing this all up is to show you that people think that God was so harsh under the Old Testament, that He was so mean and that He just struck everybody with leprosy, and He was such an unjust, or He was so immoral or wrong for what He was doing. He wasn't. Before the law came, there was mercy and grace extended to people. Complete mercy and grace. You might say, well, what about Noah? That was before the law, wasn't it? Yes, it was. But see, this is what I'm trying to get at here. Sodom and Gomorrah, that was all before the law. The Noah, the entire ark, that whole situation, the entire world, according to the Bible, was complete corrupt, was complete immoral. The only 8 people were the righteous people that were able to be saved. Otherwise, the rest of the world had to be wiped out. And the reason why a lot of people take that too is they say, well, what's the reason for this? What was the harshness of God? Why did He do this? God did that as an act of mercy to save the rest of humanity. It's like cancer for us today. Under the Old Testament too, I'm taking a lot of time to explain this. I really don't mean to, but I'm trying to expound this all. I'm trying to explain this all to why I'm trying to get you here. Under the law, according to homosexuals, kids that rebuked or reviled against their parents, disobedient people, anybody who murdered, anybody who worked on the Sabbath days, anybody who committed adultery, these people were stoned to death in the very act if they got caught. And if you didn't stone these people, the Jews were required to stone the person who didn't stone them. So under the old covenant or under the law, there was a harshness, there was a bitterness or a harsh aspect to this point. And a lot of people take that and attribute that to that's who God is, that's His nature, that's who He was. The reason why that was supposed to happen, the reason why God struck the whole world and made a flood to kill the rest of the nation is for an act of humanity or a mercy towards the rest of humanity. For us, if we have cancer, and I bet you in 500 years from now, if the Lord tarries and doesn't come back, we are going to look back at the way that we dealt with cancer, and we are going to be absolutely appalled the things that we did. We cut people's arms off, we cut people's intestines out, we cut pieces of people's brains out to save the body. You know why? Again, I just kind of said the answer, but you know why we do those things? You know why we cut the body off our limbs? Why we harm our body? is because we cut the limb off to save the rest of the body. If you can't cut the cancer out, if you leave the cancer in the body, the rest of the body, it is going to corrupt the whole body and the whole body will ultimately die. But if you cut it off this is 2025, so the time that I'm living in right now, we still do these things. We do chemotherapy. We do things that kill our own bodies to save the rest of the body. We cut off limbs and cut off pieces of our body to save the rest of the body. That is exactly what it was like under the Old Testament. But people, like under Noah's age, people were taking God's lack of justice and judgment on these people and taking that as an advocate or approval of sin. And God can't do that. At the end of the day, God is a just judge. He can't allow that to happen. So he created the law. But the law was never God never wanted the law to be a thing. He knew what it would do. He knew the pain that it would cause. He knew the condemnation and guilt that it would bring. God's original plan was never, ever have to have the law to be a thing. It was never supposed to be in place. It was never supposed to be a reality. And see, people, they see these two aspects. They think they attribute all the fear, all the aspects. They take their experiences with other people. They attribute it to God. They see the Old Testament and they just apply it to the New Testament and think that somehow they contrast with each other. They don't. They're completely separate. God never changed. The covenants did. The covenants did. That is huge. God never changed. God never stopped extending mercy. Do you know how many times God tried to help the Israelites? Do you know how many times? Time and time and time and time and time again, he's helped these stinking people. Boy, I go through the Old Testament and it just infuriates me how stupid these people were. How stupid these people were. I'd like to say I'm better. And honestly, this may be my pride or my ego getting ahead of me. But these people were just absolute morons. And I don't mean to crash on them, but look at the Israelites, for example. When they came out of Egypt, they saw plagues. They saw 7 plagues that completely were supernatural events. Absolute miracles. Frogs covering the entire face of the earth. Locusts that cover the entire sky. Things that you can't even imagine happening. Like the sea turning completely blood red. All these things, these plagues, these things that ate these people, scorpions and all these things. Complete miracles. And yet these people have the audacity to doubt God. And then after God leads them out of Egypt to start delivering them, to start bringing them out, in the desert, if you don't know the desert is a very harsh climate. During the day, it is blazing hot, and during the night, it can get very, very cold. During the day, these people would need shade, and during the night, these people would need heat. So, you know what God did? He brought a cloud during the day that would follow them all the day long, that would keep them cool during the day, and at nighttime, a flaming tornado or a flaming pillar to keep them warm. Not only that, but just in case they didn't get to see that, not only that, they had food rain down every single day for them to eat. Just rain down. Completely fine. That they could eat. They had water come out of a rock, gushing rock. They saw the Red Sea split in 2. Could you imagine that? The scholars believe where they went through, or the area of sea that they went through was probably around 80 meters deep. Something like that, or like 60 meters deep. Very deep, but that was actually one of the most shallow parts of the river. Could you imagine 60 meters of water just splitting right in front of you? And then finally you get to cross, you look back and they just crash right on top of all the Egyptians that are coming to get you. These people saw miracles that almost none of us have ever seen. Never. In our entire lives. If most people would see something like that, it would be very hard to forget an experience like that if you could see these things. But yet these exact same people, after seeing miracles for 40 dang years, not just 1 year, not just maybe a week, not just a happenstance today, but for 40 years, these people saw miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle, and yet they still ended up worshiping idols. They still doubted God to enter into the promised land. These people, after time and time and time again, after following God or forsaking God, after you've done all these miracles, and yet God still, after 40 years, brought them into the promised land. It is uncomprehendable, the mercy and grace that God gave to these people, even though they were under the law. People don't see this aspect, and because of that, they attribute to God, and they think that God is harsh towards them. God is mean towards them. He's never wanted to be like that. God is a just judge, so he had to administer these things to these people. Let me put it to you this way. If you come to me, I'm a doctor, if you come to me, and I get some x-rays on you, and I find something that is completely terribly wrong with you. You got a cancer that is going to kill you within a week. and I come back to you and I say, hey, listen, you're about to die. You got a cancer on the inside of you. And you're gonna die within a week if you don't smarten up. And if you don't believe me, you're like, yeah, right. I don't feel no different. Where's this proof of you? What are you trying? I don't believe you, not one bit. If I told you like that, you wouldn't do anything about it. You wouldn't believe that there's a problem with you. But if I show you the X-ray of your problem, now you're going to believe me, and now you're going to have corresponding action. Now I can give you the medication for you to help with your action. That is what the law was for. People didn't see how bad their sin was. People didn't see the corruption that was doing. Sodom and Gomorrah, the most immoral cities on this planet, which is now becoming once again the most immoral. You know, the Bible says out, I think it's 1 Timothy, just the New Testament in general said, during the end times, it is going to be as the days of Noah. God flooded the earth because of how immoral, how corrupt, and how disgusting this world was. And it's getting close to that again. We're not there yet, but we're getting close. And you can see it. It's disgusting what is going on. The abortion, and the homosexuality, and the murder, and the crime that goes on. The foul people are in leadership in governments, and the homicide, and the genocide that is happening across the global. Everything that's going on. It's just insane. It's completely insane. And see, people took that, they saw the harshness of it, or they took that as approval. They took lack of God's judgment and His mercy as approval of sin, and because of that, God had to do something about that. But under the New Testament, God paid that price for you. The law is no longer a thing if you're under the New Testament. The law is now abolished. You are dead to sin. You can now live in the freeness and the love of God that He has for you. I took way too much time today. I didn't even really get to talk about what I wanted to talk about here. But this is important. This is the true nature of God. 1 John chapter 4 verses 8. 1 John chapter 4 verses 16. God is love. Matthew chapter 13. Come unto me, all those who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Learn of me, for my yoke is easy to be entreated. I am humble and meek in spirit. God said, I am gentle, I am humble and meek in spirit. That is who God is. That is who He is. The Old Testament showed His mercy. Not only that, before the law showed even more of His mercy and His compassion and His grace. God never intended that to be for us. God never wanted the law to be a thing. He was fine in ministering grace. Now, God does not approve of sin, obviously. That I'm not telling you to go live in sin just because it's been paid for now. I'm not advocating you. I'm not telling you to go live in sin. It's going to hinder you. There are consequences with sin. God is not punishing you, but natural consequences will happen if you live in sin. If you're going to murder somebody, you are going to go to prison for a life sentence. Not only that, but you give complete and full access to the devil into your life. A lot of people's depression, a lot of people's pain that they're dealing with, a lot of people's physical infirmities, I know people don't like hearing this. I have an entire series talking about healing is for you. Go watch that series. I talk about this. A lot of people's aspects about this deal from a lifetime of sin. Just indulging yourself with sin for 40 years, for 10, for 5 years. You cannot do that without reaping some benefits, some consequences to your actions. God's not punishing you. Nobody's punishing you. But when you sin, you give God, or you give the devil full access to your heart, full access to your life. Depression, pain, anxiety, disease, distress, mental illnesses, physical illnesses, financial pressure, financial pain, financial distress. All of those things are results of sin. Any of the fallen human nature, any of the fallen human world is all because of sin. And God, or if you sin, you are giving the devil direct access. So you do not want to do that. Anyways, I'm way out of time today. Today I wanted to contrast these two aspects. People see the Old Testament and they attribute that to God, who He is, but that wasn't who He was. He had to do that for a certain reason. There have been two dispensations of testaments or covenants where God administered complete mercy and grace outside of the law. Anyways, I hope you kind of understood what I talked about today. Study this. Watch this again, because this has changed. Some of the things that I'm saying to you here, I said very quickly, and these things took years for me to understand these things. And I'm saying these to you very quickly. So take some more time in studying this. God bless, and have a great rest of your day.